Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale Darkness video, where today I'm going to be completing the game with the duo of Slowbro and Slowking. Now, I do think that this pairing is going to do very well in this game because the Psychic type is just very strong, and even though Water doesn't get a great stab option, the Water typing itself is great defensively, which I think is going to help them throughout the game. Now, I do actually really enjoy Slowbro's design. It's very funny, and in fact, there are some incredible animations for Slowbro in this game that I'll get to later. And while I don't really have that much of a connection to Slowking, I do like the idea that where the Shelter bites down actually changes the Pokemon fundamentally. So Slowking is super intelligent because it bit it on the head. I don't know, just very interesting. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on to their stats and move pool. Slowbro has 95 HP, 75 attack, 110 defense, 100 special attack, 80 special defense, and 30 speed. And Slowking has 95 HP, 75 attack, 80 defense, 100 special attack, 110 special defense, and 30 speed. So what I didn't realize going into this is that the only actual difference between the two is that their special defense and defense stats are swapped. For some reason, I thought that Slowking was more of a stronger special attacker, whereas Slowbro was more of a physical attacker, but that actually isn't the case. Now moving on to their moves, and the only difference between Slowbro and Slowking in their level up learn set is that Slowbro gets Withdraw and Amnesia, whereas Slowking doesn't get Withdraw, but it gets Swagger instead. And so many Water and Psychic types would love a moveset like this. It gets Fighting, Water, Psychic, Normal, Ice, Steel, Ground, Ghost, Fighting, and even Fire type coverage, which is just incredibly powerful. This all does come at one major drawback though. They have 30 base speed, which means that they are going to be in a constant speed tie unless I get them off level from each other, or I get a nature that raises or lowers their speed. And the other thing is that 30 base speed is just incredibly slow. So unless we have a severe level advantage, there's almost no chance I'm going to be outspeeding anything with a half decent speed stat. But with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Slowbro in particular, who has a Brave nature, raising its attack but lowering its speed, so luckily the speed ties won't be happening nearly as easily. And now I have a specific one if I want to be using physical moves. It has the Oblivious ability, which prevents attraction, and while it doesn't come up too often, it still is useful for a few fights in the game. And according to Bulbapedia, it gets Curse, Tackle, Yawn, and Growl by level 10. So with that, let's go and move on to our Slowking, who has a Lax nature, raising its defense but lowering its special defense, which I think is alright because that would just make it a little bit more well-rounded. It gets the Own Tempo ability, which prevents being confused, which is definitely very helpful throughout the game. And according to Bulbapedia, it too gets Curse, Tackle, Yawn, and Growl by level 10. So with that, the first thing I'm going to do is teach Seismic Toss, because Tackle isn't really all that great of a move, and I'd rather the reliability of a solid 10 damage, which will of course keep growing as I go throughout the game. And at the same time, I go ahead and teach Thunder Wave to Slowking, that way I can quarter the opponent's speed, thus making my 30 base speed not nearly as bad. And of course these are two fully evolved Pokemon, so as you might expect, the beginning really isn't an issue for them at all. However, they do still have the issue of being incredibly slow, so they are going to be outsped by just about everything they're up against, but nothing really threatens to KO either of them, so there's no way I could lose unless I got some incredibly bad luck. So after just a few turns, I slowly chip down this Horsey, and I get past the first hurdle of the game. And that brings us right along to the Power Rangers, where I decide to fight Red, because I resist Slugma's fire type moves, and even though I don't have a water type move, I still do enough damage to Houndour to where it's not really a threat. Anyway, I guess I'll go ahead and commence just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Oh, and now is a great time to talk about the animations in particular I wanted to talk about. The first being the King, of course a little hop, very nice, but then Slowbro just rushes at you. It's actually kind of terrifying, and I really do just like Slowbro's standing face as well, because it's just always open, like mouth agape. He doesn't really know what's going on. It's definitely one of my favorite standing idle animations. Anyway, we beat Red, and what we get at level 15 soon after is the move Water Gun. And yes, I did a little bit of extra training to get Water Gun, and that's because there is a ghost type right at the entrance of the Cypher base. And while I could teach Mimic, that's always a bit inconsistent. And I also could have gone to Mount Battle and possibly gotten through Area 2 for Water Pulse, but I figured just a couple levels right now, get to level 15, and get Water Gun is probably safer. At level 20, Slowking gets Confusion, and I guess I forgot to record it, but Slowbro got Confusion as well. So then we go into the battle against Lovrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I go for Confusion into the Beautifly right away. It does half, and the second one finishes it off. And so she brings out Roselia. Luckily, I do have a super effective option for it, but unfortunately it is faster. It decided not to set up Leech Seed this time though, which is very nice because I'm not going to be healing the following Pokemon, her strongest Pokemon, a Shadow Delcatty. Now, Shadow Delcatty is always going to be doing a ton of damage because Shadow moves are always super effective, but honestly, Slowbro kind of shrugged that off, didn't even feel it. I decided to slow it down with Paralysis, and I should be able to take it down with just a couple of Confusions. Once the Delcatty goes down, all that's left is the Love Disc, and it can't really do anything against me, so one Confusion, nearly to half, and a second Confusion finishes off. So with that, we beat Lovrina with ease. Moving on, and of course you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B. Well, how are you doing today, Mirror B? Well, as always, it's a treat to see you. Anyway, moving right along, we catch this Ralts for the Twisted Spoon item to raise Psychic type damage by 10%, and then I rush over to the Railgam Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect. And I don't ever teach these to Slowbro or Slowking because they just don't end up being all that great. Slowking had Hidden Power Ghost and Slowbro had Hidden Power Ice. And speaking of, I pick up Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise Ice type damage by 10%, and then I teach Slowking Ice Beam. And then I go into the battle against Snarl. He leads with a Quagsire and a Lantern, and I decided to double into the Lantern because it has super effective damage, and Quagsire is only going to be going for Rock Tomb, and both of our speeds are already abysmal, so it doesn't really matter all that much anyway. So on the following turn, I use Confusion to finish off the Lantern, and then I go for Water Gun, which is going to be hitting the Shadow Lunatone coming in. Now, if it does one-shot, I won't have to deal with Shadow Sky, but unfortunately, it takes it down to half, meaning that had I gotten a crit, it would have taken it down. I go for Ice Beam, and it hangs on by just a sliver, so I have to finish it off with a Confusion. And then out comes Cast Form. Now, the weather is up, meaning that it does get the damage bonus on Weather Ball, making it 100 base power, so I do want to get rid of it as quick as possible. Except it didn't actually do that much damage, so maybe it's not nearly as threatening as I thought it was. Anyway, with Cast Form down, he sends out his final Pokemon, Matang. And while I don't really have anything to deal with it directly, I do have Water Gun and Seismic Toss, which could deal decent damage, and Thunder Wave to slow it down so it's not nearly as big a threat. And if I can take that down, all that's left is the Quagsire, which Quagsire doesn't really have anything to deal decent damage other than Slam, and that's got some pretty bad accuracy on it. Unfortunately, I am starting to get pretty low. Slam misses, Ice Beam takes Matang down to low yellow, and Water Gun finishes it off. So all that's left is the Quagsire, and an Ice Beam and a Confusion should finish it off. Ice Beam takes it way down, Slowking survives, and Quagsire goes down to a Confusion. Okay, so with that, we move into the Snag'em base, where I teach Slowbro Psychic. And the reason for that is because Slowking also learned Psychic, but much earlier, and then I teach Slowking Flamethrower over Yawn. So we go into the battle against Gonsap. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and on the first turn, the Nuzleaf is always going to go for Fake Out, and because I have two water types, the Electrode is always going to go for Spark. I go for Psychic, which luckily gets through the Paralysis and takes it down. Then out comes Vileplume, and I should be able to take down Vileplume with a single Ice Beam, which I do. Then out comes Whiscash, and Whiscash is very tanky, so I'd be surprised. Never mind, I got a crit, so it goes down in a single hit. Then out comes his final Pokemon, Skarmory, which Hyper Beams really aren't doing that much damage, and Feint Attack isn't much better. Flamethrower takes it down in a single hit, and then all that's left is that poor Nuzleaf, who, while Seismic Toss doesn't do much to, Flamethrower does finish it off. So, with nothing really in between this battle and the next, we move right along to Gorgon. He leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and Lairon's always going to go for Protect on the first turn because Celio goes for Earthquake. So I decide to double into the Celio, and I'm actually able to take it down in a single turn. And hello, other Slowking. Anyway, I decide to Thunder Wave the other Slowking and go for Water Gun into the Lairon to take it down in a single hit, then bringing out his Ursaring, which Ursaring is very strong. The reason I'm keeping the Slowking alive is because it doesn't have any moves that are super effective against any of my Pokemon, and Earthquake's kind of its best neutral move, so it's not very threatening at all. Ice Beam takes Ursaring down to half, an unfortunate crit, but Psychic finishes it off, then bringing out his Shadow Primeape, which definitely won't be an issue because I can just hit it with a Psychic. And unfortunately, I forgot to heal my PP, so I'm out of Psychics, so I need to adapt right away. I go for Ice Beam to take it down low and Seismic Toss to finish it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Hypno. Now, luckily, Earthquake comes out, dealing a decent amount of damage to it, and luckily, Slowbro actually survives, so I'm going to have the damage that Shadow Storm would normally do to a single target, which is quite nice, so I'm able to get off a Thunder Wave. But at this point, it's not looking great. Luckily, the other Slowking is helping me quite a bit, though. So I decide to start attacking it because I know it'll take down Hypno in just a couple more hits. However, I'm not sure if it's worthwhile keeping it around because I know I'm going to be taking more and more damage from it. I go for another Ice Beam, and unfortunately at this point, it's just slow chipping away until one of us goes down, or one of us gets a lucky crit. Now, I really wasn't expecting this battle to come down to the two Slowkings duking it out, but here we are, down to just a sliver left, and unfortunately Slowking never got a crit, so I'm able to take it down. So with that, we're now moving on to the last area of the game, and if that whole first half of the video felt very fast, that's because it actually kind of was. We're doing incredibly well. But Dark Isle is always a different beast, so let's go ahead and move on to Labrina. She leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and I go for Ice Beam into the Gardevoir, taking it down to half, and Psychic into the Gorbis, which does luckily take it down in a single hit. Then out comes Roselia. I go for another Ice Beam into Gardevoir. Unfortunately, Slowking is attracted, but it gets past the infatuation. And then I get the move Amnesia, which I decide to teach over Curse because I haven't really used Curse all that much, and I think Amnesia might just be more useful. Then out comes the Shadow Farfetch'd, and Roselia goes for Leech Seed. I take it down, but it's already too late. The Altaria is going to be getting healed every turn, but it shouldn't really matter because it will go down to just a single Ice Beam. Unfortunately, it is faster and gets a crit, which is very unfortunate. It goes down to a single Ice Beam, though. Farfetch'd decides to go set up Shadow Sky instead of Shadow Panic, and we get through Lavrina with ease. Moving on, at level 48, Slowking finally gets Psychic, which I teach over Confusion, and we climb the mountain to get to Snaddle. He leads with a Metang and a Quagsire. I go for Flamethrower into the Metang, taking it down immediately, and I go for Psychic into the Quagsire to take it down. Out comes Scizor and Solrock, and between the two, I need to get rid of Solrock because it is going to set up Shadow Sky. Unfortunately, it of course is faster than us, so it gets to set it up anyway. And Water Gun doesn't take it down in a single hit, so it will be attacking on the following turn. So the Fruity Pebbles rain down. I go for an Ice Beam and a Psychic to finish off the Solrock and possibly take down the Castform. Ice Beam takes down Solrock. Then out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Starmie, and Psychic takes down Castform in a single hit, leaving another Water Psychic type, which unfortunately I don't match up well into at all. So I go for Psychic, which does a decent amount of damage, a lucky special defense drop, and Seismic Toss takes it down to low red. So at this point, I definitely win. Even a Shadow Break doesn't take down Slowking, and we beat Snaddle. Now moving on to Ardos, he leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam. And unfortunately, this first turn comes down to complete luck. Luckily, Swallow did decide to go for Shadow Sky this turn, but had it gone for Shadow Half, I definitely could have lost this basically on the first turn. Anyway, Swallow goes down, and then out comes Kingdra, and Fruity Pebbles rain down. Now, between these two, I definitely want to keep the Kingdra alive compared to the Alakazam, so I'm going to Thunder Wave it now, and I'm going to go for Seismic Toss. Now, I am kind of glad that I couldn't take it down in a single turn, because this better sets up for the following Pokemon coming in. So I go for Ice Beam to finish it off, and then out comes Heracross. Now, Heracross could have been a real threat with Mega Horn, but with Psychic, I take it down, and then out comes Electabuzz, his second Shadow Pokemon. And if I can set this up right, I think I should be in a winning position. I decide to go for Thunder Wave into Electabuzz. It just goes for Shadow Break, dealing a decent amount of damage to Slowking, but not enough to take it down. I go for Psychic to take down the Kingdra, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Snorlax. But the thing is that Electabuzz, when it's paired with Snorlax, will almost always go for Shadow Mist to lower my evasiveness. That way Shadow End hits more often. But the thing is I can paralyze the Snorlax, and it's already a 60% accurate move, so it's 25% chance not to act and 60 or 40% chance to miss. So it's not actually all that threatening. I did get a lucky crit on the Snorlax to take it down below half, and a second Psychic does finish it off. All that's left is the Electabuzz, which, because it's paralyzed, is slower than us and goes down in a single hit. Okay, not too bad. We move on to Gorgon once again. He leads with his Slowking and Ursaring, and I decide to do what I did last time. I go for Thunder Wave into the Slowking, and I go for Seismic Toss. I can start whittling it down now. That way it's not going to be a threat later on in the fight. And since Ursaring can't protect this turn, I decide to go for Psychic into it, and deal a little bit more damage to Slowking. Unfortunately, Ursaring actually does survive on just a bit of health left, so I do have to take down the Slowking here. And for some reason, I can't remember for the life of me why I did this. I decided to call Slowking and use Slowbro to finish off the opponent's Slowking, which I could have also just gotten damage on the Aggron, but for some reason I decided not to. Maybe I thought that I could keep Slowking alive that turn on just a sliver? I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, Walrein comes out. I've already done a decent amount of damage to it. Psychic finishes it off, and then out comes his Shadow Poliwrath. Now the thing about Poliwrath is it is part fighting, which is something I always have to tell myself because for some reason I always forget. Anyway, with Poliwrath down, out comes Mr. Mime, and while I don't really have a great move to deal with Mr. Mime, it's not actually all that threatening with Shadow Storm if Shadow Sky isn't set up, so I just ignore it for now, take down Aggron, and then it should just take a couple turns to take down. Another Shadow Storm. Flamethrower takes it down to almost half, and Seismic Toss takes it down to a sliver, and all that's left is one more Flamethrower to finish it off. So with that, we beat Gorgon fairly easily. Moving on to Eldest. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go for Psychic into the Manectric right away, and Thunder Wave into the Ninjask. That way it's not hitting Silver Winds nearly as often. Manectric goes down to a single Psychic, and then he sends out Shadow Salamence. Now the thing is that Ninjask does have the speed boost ability, so the paralysis debuff on the speed isn't going to matter in a turn or two. So I go for Ice Beam, take down Salamence in a single hit, and then out comes Flygon. Ninjask is luckily paralyzed to go for Psychic to take it down because I don't want it to get to that point. And then out comes Marowak. And honestly, between these two, I think Marowak's going to be the bigger threat, so I decide to go for it with Ice Beam to guarantee I take it down in a single hit. Whereas if Flygon doesn't go down to Psychic, it's not that much of a concern. And it actually does go down in a single hit, then all that's left is the Shadow Lapras. Now because the Shadow Sky is already set up, it's just going to start going for Shadow Storms. And I get a lucky defense drop from Psychic, so a second Psychic actually finishes it off. So with that, Eldest is defeated, and we move on to the big box legendary, Shadowlogia. And right away, I set up Thunder Wave, and I go for Seismic Toss. Honestly, I just wasn't really sure what to do here. Seismic Toss actually does do a decent amount of damage though. Ice Beam takes it down to yellow, Seismic Toss takes it down to a sliver, and then one last Ice Beam finishes it off. So now it's time to move on to the final boss, Greevil. He leads with a Shadow Rhydon and Moltres, and I go for Ice Beam right away to get rid of Rhydon, and that's because I just want the experience from this fight. I already know I can take down Rhydon in a single hit, so it's not really testing much. I decided to go for Amnesia here because I want to see how much Moltres does with the Amnesia already stacked. I go for Thunder Wave. Right before Executor takes me down with a Shadow End, I go for another Amnesia, so now I'm at +4. Go for Seismic Toss to hopefully take down Executor, but it is just a little tankier than I thought. A second Seismic Toss does finish it off, bringing out Tauros. And Tauros is always going to be a bit of a threat because it sets up Shadow Sky and enables the rest of the team to do huge amounts of damage. But because I already have that +4 special defense, Moltres actually isn't doing that much. The only thing it could really do to hurt me is burn me, which it does have a decent chance to do. Out comes Articuno, and Articuno is kind of the best benchmark to test just how strong I am on the special attacking side, and I'm not even close to doing half. So that's good to know. I am going to at least need the help of Slowking to take this down, even if I use my rare candies. I go for another one, and there's the burn I mentioned, but I go down to the Shadow Storm. Okay, well I decide to teach Slowbro Protect over Water Gun, because Water Gun's not really used anymore, and we go back in for a second attempt. I decide to double into the Moltres with Psychic, that way I can see if I can take it down in a single turn with both of them attacking. And it's not quite half. Rhydon hits a Shadow Wind, doing over half to Slowking, which isn't a great sign. Moltres does go down though. Then out comes Executor once again. I go for Ice Beam into the Executor, which does take it down. And then out comes the Tauros once again. And unfortunately Rhydon hits the second Shadow Wind, taking Slowking down. And I go for a Psychic to finish off Rhydon. Out comes Articuno once again, but I already know how this goes. Tauros sets up Shadow Sky, Articuno uses Shadow Chill, doing a ton of damage, and without the special defense boosts, I take so much more, and I go down pretty quickly. So I decide to use all my rare candies to get them both up to level 60. So I go back in again, and Shadow Fires still are hurting a bit. I don't quite take it to half with Slowking still, but Slowking is taking those Shadow ends just a little bit better. Out comes Executor. I go for Ice Beam into Rhydon, and I decide to set up Amnesia now, because I know that I'm going to need it for the Articuno and Zapdos. So I get +2, I go for Ice Beam into Executor, and I decide to use Psychic to hit the Articuno as it comes out. So hopefully I can get a head start on taking it down. And Psychic still isn't doing an amazing amount of damage. Now Slowking does have Flamethrower, so I'm hoping that should take it down from here. Tauros is wasting its time using Shadow Hold. Go for Flamethrower, and it survives on just a sliver of health. Very unfortunate. Articuno goes down, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Zapdos. Now Zapdos is going to be very threatening, however, if I can get it paralyzed, maybe I can take it down. Slowking survives on 12 HP, and gets the paralysis off, and I get a crit on Tauros, taking it down. That might just be the luck I needed, because Slowking goes down to the Fruity Pebbles, and I go for Psychic, which takes Zapdos down to low yellow, and because of that Amnesia boost, I survive on 3 HP and finish it off. That was an incredibly close match, and honestly, level 60 felt perfect. So with that, let's go ahead and see just how well they did. They beat the game at a time of 8 hours, 35 minutes, and 8 seconds, both at level 60, with 3 faints throughout the game, with 2 of those coming from Gravel, and 1 to some random trainer that I accidentally lost to. Very unfortunate, but honestly these 2 did much better than I expected, though there were definitely a lot of hiccups throughout the run, but the main thing is that they get Thunder Wave right off the bat, so most of their issues are actually cut down immensely, with its only real drawback being that it takes a turn to set up. But honestly, that's not even all that much of an issue. So with that, these 2 actually find themselves in the S tier, right behind Scizor and Scyther. So they did incredibly well, much better than I had originally expected. And I think it really comes down to the fact that their stats are just really good, and their move pool is just incredible for a water type. And having Psychic tacked onto that is just very helpful in this game, because even though there are dark types in this game, there aren't a lot of dark types, and Psychic is just a very good neutral move against most types in the game, other than Steel, but luckily they get Flamethrower, and at the worst they had Water Gun and Seismic Toss, which still got them by fairly well. However, none of it could have been done without Thunder Wave. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!